Alright, so this is my Echo CS-346. I've had this chainsaw for, geez, at least 20 years. It's always been a very good chainsaw. I know it's an Echo and it's nothing really fantastic, but I've always enjoyed this chainsaw. It's very good for trimming stuff. But anyway, this year the carburetor is, I think, had enough. I have to prime the thing and prime the thing and prime the thing and choke it, and finally I can get it to start. So I decided that maybe I'm going to change the carburetor and the primer bulb and everything. So, of course, Amazon, they have everything like really ridiculously cheap. So for 15 bucks, I got this made in China carburetor kit. And it basically consists of some fuel hose, a new air filter, spark plug, fuel filter that goes inside the tank, primer bulb, another primer bulb, carb gasket, fuel vent, and finally the carburetor. And like I said, all for like 15 bucks. So we'll get this baby apart, we'll change it out, and we'll see if we fix it. I also have, there's a 16-inch bar on here right now. I believe that's 16. And I actually have this little 10-inch bar here. So I got a new chain for it because the chain I had and I totally killed. But with the short blade on there, my wife's not actually afraid to use the saw, and you know, it works really well for trimming small branches. So let's get this thing apart. So the first thing I'm going to do, just to make this easier, we'll take the bar off. So I have some tools out already. This is just a 10 millimeter. So we've got 1, 2, and then we remove the chain brake assembly. Put that aside. And we can remove bar. Put them aside. I'm not going to be putting these back on. Like I said, I'm going to put the 10-inch bar back on it for now. And then if I need to cut some bigger stuff, we put the 16 back on. I've got bigger saws, so. Alright, this thing's a little dirty. So I'm just going to go clean it off, and I'll put you back on in a few minutes. Alright, so I'm back. A little action with the blowgun. Blew all the sawdust and oil and crap off of there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drain the gas out of it. Otherwise it's going to be all over the place. So I'm basically going to remove the fuel cap at the same time. Put that aside. Fuel filter's right here, so we'll pull that out at the same time if we can. Okay, so there's the filter. Put the gas aside. So the first thing I see is the filter has like this little wire thing on there that holds, I guess it's like a clamp. So I think we'll just pull the filter off. Put that aside, and we'll pull the little clamp off because we're not going to reuse that. That tube's actually kind of long. Next we're going to take off the air filter. And that's clean because I actually blew it off the other day, but didn't take care of my running issue. So now we have access to the primer bulb and the carburetor. And we can also see our fuel line over here. It's kind of interesting how that goes. I guess it feels like it's routed. Oh, you know what? Don't know. Anyway, off subject. Let's remove the carburetor, or excuse me, the air filter mount. Just the bridge that goes over the front of the carburetor. I suppose that holds the carburetor in place too, because the screws seem like they're quite long. Okay, now I've noticed there's a washer on that side, there's a washer on this side. So maybe we'll put them back on here so we don't lose them. And then there's a little flap over here. That's actually our choke. Put that there. I believe. We'll just remove our choke rod. Just pull it aside. Okay, and then right here we actually have a little hose that goes to the primer bulb. And then the linkage for the carburetor is actually over here. So, how do we get that off? Oh, okay. So you can just hold the little rod with a pair of needle nose pliers and just make note that it goes into the rear hole. And then here's our fuel line. Pull that off. And there's our old carburetor. I assume that the fuel pump has an issue on this thing, just by the way it's running. Once it gets going, it's good, but it doesn't want to stay running. Once you shut it off, it's a real bear to start it again. Okay, and then gasket. Let's remove that. And we can pull on. Here's our little fuel line. That's quite interesting. And then the primer bulb. Looks like the primer bulb just presses into place somehow. Pull the lines off of it. Okay, so this is for the primer bulb feed. And then this one goes to our vent, which is actually inside case over here. Maybe I have to remove the rewind. And then the small line goes to the primer. I don't know if I have enough line for that. We might have to reuse that. I love how everything you get from Amazon has no friggin' instructions, so I have to make a video to do it. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. Let's see here. right over here, there's a couple tabs that hold that primer bulb in place. We're going to pry on them. Here's our hook. The primer bulb pops out. Cool. Alright, so there's our old primer bulb. It's not broken, but we have two new ones. So it was in there like that. So the small pipe was towards the front. Just pop our new one in place like that. And I guess we can address this vent pipe. Remove the rewind. Fingers are a little slippery from the gas and oil mixture, but it sure beats having gasoline soaked fingers when you go in the house later on and your wife tells you you stink. My wife would never tell me I stink. My brother might, but not my wife. Off. And I still don't see the vent. Where shall we go next? Do we need to replace the vent is the question. I'm going to say we're not going to change the vent. I'll hook the vent hose back up. I'm going to run a new hose. The primer, or as they call it on here, the purge pump, and that goes to the back one. I think they call this hose Tygon. Alright, so that's on. Got plenty of that. That'll last me probably a while. We have our new filter here. How should we go about doing this? Maybe we'll measure this hose up to the old one. And we'll slip our ring on there, or no, what we'll do is we'll put the hose through the grommet first into the tank. That might make more sense. So we'll put the clamp ring on there. Put our new fuel filter on there. Got the clamp over the filter. We can stick the filter back in the actually, we should leave the filter out. I'll show you why in a second. Leave the filter hanging. There's our new base gasket. There's our new carburetor. Connect the fuel line. I think it's kind of funny that there was a clamp on the actual fuel line, but on the filter, but not on the carburetor. Then we'll take our throttle cable and pull this down. This is why we left it out. We'll take our throttle cable, and like I said, it goes to the rear hole on the linkage. This is where it gets fun. So you need to have several items in place all at the same time. You have to figure out how that's going to happen. So the choke horn goes over the front of the carburetor as such. The screws go through the carburetor, and then we can stick our gasket on the back side, and then somehow manipulate everything into place, and then the gasket falls off. So then you stick the gasket back on, and you try it again. Alright, so after a little bit of fighting, I actually managed to get, it's a pain in the neck, I'll tell you. I managed to get the gasket back there and the one screw in place. So you got to get this choke horn back on the choke rod. Why doesn't that seem right? No, it is. Okay. Never mind. So then we sneak this washer on here and then get that through there. And by some luck, the gasket will be lined up. Well, that makes me happy. So as you're tightening, you just want to make sure that the choke doesn't bind. It's not. And just make these tight. You don't have to kill them. Okay. Now I mentioned before that there's a rubber, I don't know what I called it before, rubber tube or whatever. It goes over by where the idle speed adjustment is, so probably should leave it off until I get this thing running, but I don't know if that's going to matter or not. So to adjust the idle speed, you would go through this hole here anyway, and you'd turn that. So anyhow, now that the carburetor's in place, you want to make sure that the fuel line isn't pinched, so I would just give it a little pull. Actually, might want to push down. Push down the inlet in the carburetor just a little bit so it doesn't have that crazy angle. You can pop your fuel filter in place. Stick the fuel cap in place for now. Now, I think this hose is going to be too big for the other end of the primer. Actually, it might fit. Yeah, it looks like it'll fit. So we want to cut another piece of line. It's so much bigger though. It totally looks like it's going to interfere with the choke rod, but there you go. Choke works. Throttle works. Looks like we're getting somewhere. All right, I'm going to put the rewind back on here and put some gas in it, and then we'll move on. All right, so I put the fuel back in it. And now I'm going to test the primer before I actually put the air filter back on. So looks like that works. I don't see any leaks. That's good. There's our new air filter. Put that in place. If it fits. Oh, the Chinesium parts. Did I put it the right way? That's the right way. Oh, fits tight. I guess that's good. Okay, now actually the last thing we need to do before we're going to fire this baby, change this old spark plug. I must have made that really tight the other day. It is a 3/4, by the way, or 19 millimeter. The Chinese are funny. So the original's an NGK, obviously, very commonly known plug. And the replacement one is a CDK. Part numbers are totally different, so. But, like I said, 15 bucks. Okay. Hook our plug up. Okay, our switch is on. Our trigger lock. Choke. We primed it already. Let's see what happens. That's pretty good. I would assume we have to adjust the carburetor. But probably should open the door first. Alright, so I had to fiddle around with the high and low screws as well as the idle. I also had to put the bar on because it started spraying all the chain oil all over the place. So I guess the pump works pretty well. So, but as you can see, it sprayed a nice amount of oil right on my workbench here. So basically what you got to do is you got to kind of get it to idle first with the low speed screw. And then once you have the low speed screw set, then you go to wide open throttle and you adjust the high speed screw until you can basically hear by ear that it's running good. I'm going to have to go cut some wood with it probably tomorrow because it's dark now and my neighbors are probably going to freak out that I've already made some noise. But yeah, that's it. So like I said, 15 bucks Amazon. I don't remember what the name of it was, but if you search carburetor for Echo CS-346 that this carburetor fits a whole ton of different Echoes. Yeah, you'll get it. So anyhow, thanks for watching.